Essays in Idleness by Kenko. 51. The cloistered emperor, having decided to introduce water from the Oi River into the pond of his Kameyama palace, commanded the inhabitants of Oi to build a water wheel. He paid them generously, and the men worked hard for several days to construct it. But when the wheel was put in place, it failed to turn at all. The men tried in various ways to repair it, but it stood there useless, stubbornly refusing to turn. The emperor thereupon summoned some villagers from Uji and ordered them to build a water wheel. They put one together without difficulty and presented it. The wheel turned perfectly and was splendidly efficient at drawing up water. Expert knowledge in any art is a noble thing. 52. A certain priest in the Ninnaji, regretting that he had never worshipped at Iwashimitsu, though now advanced in years, made up his mind one day and set off alone on foot on his pilgrimage. He worshipped at the Gokuraku temple and the Kora shrine, and supposing that was all there was to Iwashimitsu, returned to the Ninnaji. Back in his temple, he told his fellow priests, "I've succeeded in realizing my dreams of many years." The shrine was even more impressive than I had been led to believe. But I wonder why the other pilgrims all climbed the mountain. Is there something there? I wanted to have a look for myself, but my main object, after all, was to worship the god, so I decided not to explore the mountain. Even in trivial matters, a guide is desirable. Footnote: the priest visited 2 minor buildings, but did not realize that the main part of the shrine was on the mountain. 53. This story too is about a priest at the Ninnaji. A farewell party was being offered for an acolyte about to become a priest, and the guests were all making merry when one of the priests, drunk and carried away by high spirits, picked up a 3-legged cauldron nearby and clamped it over his head. It caught on his nose, but he flattened it down, pulled the pot over his face, and danced out among the others, to the great amusement of everyone. After the priest had been dancing for a while, he tried to pull the pot off, but it refused to be budged. A pall fell over the gathering, and people wondered blankly what to do. They tried one thing and another, only succeeding in bruising the skin around his neck. The blood streamed down, and the priest's neck became so swollen that he had trouble breathing. The others tried to split the pot, but it was not easily broken, and the reverberations inside were unbearable. Finally, when all else had failed, they threw a thin garment over the legs of the pot, which stuck up like horns, and giving the priest a stick to lean on, led him off by the hand to a doctor in Kyoto. People they met on the way stared at this apparition with unconstrained astonishment. The priest presented a most extraordinary sight as he sat inside the doctor's office facing him. Whatever he said came out as unintelligible in a muffled roar. "I can't find anything similar in my medical books," said the doctor, "and there aren't any oral traditions either." The priest had no choice but to return to the Ninnaji, where his close friends and his aged mother gathered at his bedside, weeping with grief, though the priest himself probably could not hear them. At this point, somebody suggested, "Wouldn't it be better at least to save his life, even if he loses his nose and ears? Let's try pulling the pot off with all our strength." They stuffed straw around the priest's neck to protect it from the metal, and then pulled hard enough to tear off his head. Only holes were left to show where his ears and nose had been, but the pot was removed. They barely managed to save the priest's life, and for a long time afterwards, he was gravely ill. 54. There was a ravishing acolyte at Omuro, and various priests were scheming how they might inveigle him into going out with them. They enlisted the help of some talented entertainers, who carefully prepared an elegant hamper and fitted it into a kind of box which they buried in the ground at a pleasant spot not far from Narabigauko. The priest, after scattering autumn leaves all over the place so that no one would guess anything lay buried there, returned to Omuro and induced the boy to accompany them on the picnic. The priests, delighted with their success, tramped around the neighborhood with the boy until they came near the mossy spot where the box was buried. There they sat themselves in a row. "I'm absolutely exhausted," said one priest. "I wish there were somebody to burn autumn leaves." And another, "Why don't you miracle-working priests try praying?" asked a third. The priests, rubbing their rosaries and elaborately describing magic gestures with their fingers, started to walk toward the tree beneath which the treasure lay buried. After this extraordinary performance, they scraped away the leaves to find nothing. Thinking they might have mistaken the place, they roamed over the whole mountain, leaving nowhere undug, but still there was nothing. Someone had observed them burying the hamper and stolen it while they were off in Omuro. The priest, for a time at a loss for words, presently fell into quarreling most unpleasantly, and returned in a rage to the temple. Any excessively ingenious scheme is sure to end in a fiasco. 55. A house should be built with the summer in mind. In winter it is possible to live anywhere, but a badly made house is unbearable when it gets hot. There is nothing cool-looking about deep water. A shallow flowing stream is far cooler. When you are reading fine print, you will find that a room with sliding doors is lighter than one with hinged shutters. A room with a high ceiling is cold in winter and dark by lamplight. People agree that a house which has plenty of spare room is attractive to look at, and may be put to many different uses. 56. How boring it is when you meet a man after a long separation, and he insists on relating at interminable length everything that has happened to him in the meantime. Even if the man is an intimate, somebody you know extremely well, how can you but feel a certain reserve on meeting him again after a time? The vulgar sort of person, even if he goes on a brief excursion somewhere, is breathless with excitement as he relates as matters of great interest everything that has happened to him. When the well-bred man tells a story, he addresses himself to one person, even if many people are present, though the others listen too, naturally. But the ill-bred man flings out his words into the crowd, addressing himself to no one in particular, and described what happened so graphically that everyone bursts into boisterous laughter. You can judge a person's breeding by whether he is quite impassive even when he tells an amusing story, or laughs a great deal even when relating a matter of no interest. It is most distressing when the good and bad of somebody's appearance or the quality of a certain person's scholarship is being evaluated, for the speaker to refer to himself by way of comparison. 57. It is exasperating when discussions of poetry are devoted to bad poems. How, one wonders, could anyone with the smallest knowledge of the art have supposed such verses were worthy of discussion? Even to an outsider, it is both embarrassing and painful to listen to someone discuss a subject, whatever it may be, that he doesn't really know. 58. Some say, as long as your mind is set on enlightenment, it does not make such difference where you live. Even if you live with your family and mingle in society, why should that interfere with your prayers for happiness in the future life? Men who speak in such terms know nothing whatsoever about the meaning of prayers for the future life. Indeed, once a man realizes how fleeting this life is and resolves to escape at all costs from the cycle of birth and death, what pleasure can he take in a daily attendance on some lord or in schemes to benefit his family? A man's mind is influenced by his environment, and unless he has peaceful surroundings, he will have difficulty in carrying out his religious duties. People cannot compare in resourcefulness with men of the past. People today cannot compare in resourcefulness with men of the past. They go into the mountain forest to live as hermits, only to find the life unendurable without some means of allaying their hunger and shielding themselves from the storms. As a result, how can they help but display at times something akin to a craving for worldly goods? But it would be absurd to conclude, therefore, there is no point in becoming a priest. If that is the best a man can do, why should he abandon the world? Despite everything, once a man has entered the way of the Buddha and turned his back on the world, Even supposing he has desires, they cannot possibly resemble the deep-seated cravings of men in power. How much expense to society are his paper bedclothes, his hempen robe, a bowl of food, and some millet broth? His wants are easily met, his heart quickly satisfied. Since, moreover, he is in some sense ashamed of his appearance, he obviously will most often stay away from evil and keep close to good. It is desirable somehow to make a break from this world so that one may benefit from having been born a man. The man who surrenders himself to his desires and neglects the path of enlightenment is hardly any different from the brute beasts. Footnote: ashamed of his appearance, that is, being ashamed of his shaven head and black robes, and he will avoid frivolous company. (59) A man who has determined to take the great step should leave unresolved all plans for disposing of urgent or worrisome business. Some men think, I'll wait a bit longer, until I take care of this matter, or I might as well dispose of that business first, or people will surely laugh at me if I leave such and such as it stands. I'll arrange things now so that there won't be any future criticism, or I've managed to survive all these years. I'll wait till the matter is cleared up. It won't take long. I mustn't be hasty. But if you think in such terms, the day for taking the great step will never come. For you will keep discovering more and more unavoidable problems, and there will never be a time when you run out of unfinished business. My observation of people leads me to conclude, generally speaking, that even people with some degree of intelligence are likely to go through life supposing they have ample time before them. But would a man fleeing because a fire has broken out in his neighborhood say to the fire, "Wait a moment, please"? To save his life, a man will run away, indifferent to shame, abandoning his possessions. Is a man's life any more likely to wait for him? Death attacks faster than fire or water, and is harder to escape. When its hour comes, can you refuse to give up on your aged parents, your little children, your duty to your master, your affections for others, because they are hard to abandon? 60. Joshin, an abbot of Shinjoin, was a high-ranking priest of great holiness. He was extremely fond of what are known as potato heads, and devoured prodigious quantities of them. He kept a large bowl heaped with these potatoes by his knees in his scripture class, and would go on eating as he lectured on the sacred books. If he ever fell ill, he would shut himself up in his room for a week or a fortnight, announcing that he was taking a cure, and indulge himself with especially good potatoes, eating more than ever. This was how he cured any and all ailments. He never gave his potatoes to anyone else, but ate them all himself. Joshin had always been extremely poor, but his teacher on his deathbed left Joshin 200 kan of copper coins and a monk's residence hall. Joshin sold the building for 100 kan, making a total of 30,000 hiki, all of which he decided to use for buying potatoes. He deposited the money with a man in the capital and had potatoes delivered to him in lots of 10 kan worth each. In this way he was able to eat all the potatoes he could desire, so many indeed that although he made no other use of the money, it soon disappeared. People said, "A poor man who falls heir to 300 kan and then spends it in that way must be pious indeed." Once, when this abbot saw a certain priest, he dubbed him the Shiro-uri-uri. Somebody asked what a Shiri-uri-uri was, and he replied, "I have no idea, but if such a thing existed, I am sure it would look like that priest's face." This abbot was handsome, robustly built, a great eater, and better than anyone at calligraphy, Buddhist scholarship, and rhetoric. He was highly regarded within his temple as a beacon of the sect, but being an eccentric who cared nothing for society and acted exactly as he pleased in everything, he refused ever to conform to the others. Even when he sat down to a collation after performing a service, he would never wait until the others were served, but began eating by himself as soon as the food was put before him. Then, the moment he felt like leaving, he would stand up from the table and go off by himself. He did not eat even collations in his temple at the regular times with the others, but whenever he felt like eating, whether in the middle of the night or at the break of day. When he felt like sleeping, he shut himself in his room, even in broad daylight, and refused to listen when people addressed him, no matter how urgent their business might be. Once he awakened, he might then spend several nights without sleeping, going about serenely, whistling as he went. His behavior was unconventional, but people, far from disliking him, allowed him everything. Might it have been because his virtue had attained to the highest degree? (61) The custom of dropping a rice steamer from the palace roof on the occasion of an imperial birth is not a regular practice. It is a kind of magic, resorted to when the afterbirth has been slow. Unless this occurs, the ceremony is not performed. The custom originated with the lower classes and has no real historical justification. The rice steamers are ordered from the village of Ohara. A painting preserved in an old treasury depicts a member of the lower classes dropping a rice steamer from the roof of a house where a child is being born. (62) When the Princess Ensei was a small child, she asked someone going to the cloistered emperor's palace to relay the following poem as a message from her. The letter in 2 strokes, the letter like an ox's horns, the straight letter and the crooked letter too, all spell my love for you. The poem means that she missed her father, the cloistered emperor. 63. The use of soldiers to protect the leader during the second week ceremony goes back some time in the past when robbers interrupted the rites. The soldiers were known as officers on watch, and their functions gradually developed into the present ritual. The auguries for the entire year are revealed by the conduct of these ceremonies, and the use of soldiers is therefore disturbing. 64. A certain gentleman expressed the opinion that the use of 5 hanging straps on the blinds of a carriage is not necessarily the privilege of a particular class of person. Any man who has reached the highest rank to which his birth entitles him may ride in such a carriage. 65. Court caps in recent years have become much taller than formerly. People who own the old-fashioned boxes must add an extra lid to accommodate the new caps. 66. The chancellor from Okamoto once gave Shimotsuke no Sakakatsu, the master of falconry, a brace of pheasants and a branch of fully opened red plum blossoms, with the command that he attach the birds to the branch. Takekatsu replied, I do not know how to attach birds to a branch and blossom, nor do I know how to attach a pair to a single branch. The chancellor asked the palace chef and various other people if they knew the art, but finally he summoned Tatsukatsu again and said, It looks as if no one else knows either. Attach the birds in whatever way you think best. Takekatsu attached 1 pheasant to a bare plum branch and offered this to his chancellor. Takekatsu explained, A pheasant may be attached to a branch of brushwood or else to a plum branch, but if it is to a plum branch, only to one which has a bud or has lost its blossoms. It may also be attached to a 5-needled pine. The branch should be 7 or else 6 feet long. It is pointed by slashing downwards diagonally, then cutting upwards from the opposite side to a depth of 1/2 inch. The pheasant is attached halfway along the branch. Sometimes the pheasant is attached by the head, sometimes by the feet. The bird should be fastened at 2 places with arrowroot vine that has not been split. The ends of the vine should be cut to the same length as the false wing of the bird and twisted into the shape of an ox's horns. The branch, customarily presented on the morning of the first snow, is carried over the shoulder and brought in through the central gate with appropriate ceremony. The messenger follows the stone pavement under the eaves, taking care not to leave footprints in the snow. He plucks a few of the downy rump feathers and scatters them, then leans the branch against the porch railing in the palace building. If a gift is bestowed, he throws it over his shoulder, bows in gratitude, and withdraws. Even if a snowfall is the first of the year, A pheasant should not be offered in the snow if the snow is too scattered to cover the toes of the shoes. The rump feathers are scattered to suggest that the pheasant has been captured by an imperial falcon, since the falcon normally seizes its prey by the small of the back. I wonder why a pheasant is not attached to a branch in flower. A passage in Ise Monogatari tells how someone in early autumn once tied a pheasant to an artificial branch of plum and sent it with the poem, "These blossoms that now I pluck for you, my lord, distinguish not the season." I wonder if artificial flowers were not inappropriate. 67. The Iwamoto and Hashimoto sanctuaries within the Keimo shrines are dedicated respectively to Narihara and Sanakata. People are constantly confusing the two. One year I visited the shrine and stopped an aged priest who was passing by to inquire about them. He answered, "They say that Sanakata is at the place where he left his reflection in the sacred stream. Hashimoto is the closer of the two sanctuaries to the water, so I imagine that one is his. I have heard that the lines by the abbot from Yoshimitsu, the charming gentleman of ancient times who loved the moon and brooded over the cherry blossoms lies here, Ariwara, refer to the Iwamoto shrine, but I am sure that you are much better informed than we are." I was impressed by his extremely deferential way of speaking. The lady Kono, who was at the service of the cloistered princess in Imadegawa, was the author of numerous poems included in the imperial anthologies. When she was young, she would often compose cycles of 100 poems and write them down with ink mixed with water from the stream before these two sanctuaries. She would then offer her manuscript at the shrine. She enjoyed a truly exceptional reputation, and many of her poems were on people's lips. She was also a splendid writer of Chinese poetry and of prefaces to collections of poetry. 68. There was in the Tsukichu a certain man, a constable of peace, it would seem, who for many years had eaten 2 boiled radishes each morning under the impression that radishes were a sovereign remedy for all ailments. Once some enemy forces attacked and surrounded his constabulary, choosing a moment when the place was deserted. Just then, 2 soldiers rushed out of the building and engaged the enemy, fighting with no thought for their lives until they drove away all the enemy troops. The constable, greatly astonished, asked the 2 soldiers, "You have fought most gallantly, gentlemen, considering I have never seen you here before. Might I ask who you are?" "We are the radishes you have faithfully eaten every morning for so many years," they answered, and with these words they disappeared. So deep was his faith in radishes that even such a miracle could occur. 69. The holy man of Shosha accumulated so much merit by frequently reading aloud of the Lotus Sutra that his 6 senses attained a state of purity. Once, while on a journey, he entered an inn and heard the murmur of beans as they were boiled over the fire of bean husks. The beans were saying, "How cruel of you, who have been so close to us, to subject us to this terrible ordeal of boiling." The husks made a crackling sound as they burned, which the holy man could tell meant, "Do you suppose we like doing it? Being burnt is horribly painful, but there is nothing we can do to prevent it. Don't be so angry with us." 70. During the Genno period, a palace concert was given in the Seisho Hall just after the famous Biwa Genjo had been lost. The minister from the Chrysanthemum Pavilion was to play the biwa called Bokuba. He took his seat and was making sure, first of all, that the frets were in place when one fell off. He used some rice paste he kept in his wallet to fasten the fret back onto his instrument. He tried satisfactorily during the presentation of the offerings to the gods, and nothing untoward occurred during the concert. A woman in the audience, who wore a silken hood, having some grievance against the musician, had sneaked up to his biwa and, wrenching the fret free from the instrument, had replaced it as before, so that no one could detect anything was amiss. Footnote: the Biwa was stolen in 1316 and recovered in 1318. 71. As soon as I hear a name, I feel convinced I can guess what the owner looks like, but it never happens when I actually meet the man that his face is what I supposed. I wonder if everybody shares my experience of feeling when I hear some story about the past that the house mentioned in the story must have been rather like this or that house belonging to people of today, or that the persons of the stories resemble people I see now. It has happened on various occasions, too, that I have felt, just after someone has said something, or I could have seen something or thought of something, that it has occurred before. I cannot remember when it was, but I feel absolutely certain that the thing has happened. Am I the only one who has such impressions? 72. Things which seem poor in taste. Too many personal effects cluttering up the place where one is sitting. Too many brushes in an ink box. Too many Buddhas in a family temple. Too many stones and plants in a garden. Too many children in a house. Too many words on meeting someone. Too many meritorious deeds recorded in a petition. Things which are not offensive, no matter how numerous. Books in a book cart, and rubbish in a rubbish heap. 73. Is it because the truth is so boring that most stories one hears are false? People tend to exaggerate even when relating things they have actually witnessed. But when months or years have intervened and the place is remote, they are all the more prone to invent whatever tales suit their fancies. And when these have been written down, fictions are accepted as fact. This holds true of skill of the various arts. Ignorant men who know nothing about these arts praise the masters indiscriminately, as if they were gods, but the experts gives no credence to such tales. Things known by report always prove quite different when one has actually seen them. When a man spews forth whatever nonsense comes to his mind, not caring that he may be exposed on the spot, people soon realize that he is lying. Again, if a man, though himself doubting the truth of a story, tells it exactly as it was related to him, with a self-satisfied twitching of the nose, the lie is not his. But it is frightening when a man tells a lie convincingly, deliberately blurring the details and places, and pretending not to remember exactly what happened, but carefully leaving no loose ends. Nobody protests very energetically at a lie which redounds to his own prestige. If, when everyone else is listening with pleasure to some lie, you decide that it would be pointless to be the only one to protest, that wasn't what happened, and listen in silence, you may even be cited as a witness, and the story will seem all the more authentic. There's no escaping it. The world is full of lies. It is safest always to accept what one hears as if it were utterly commonplace and devoid of interest. Stories told by the lower classes are full of startling incidents. The well-bred man does not tell stories about prodigies. I do not mean to suggest, however, that one should not believe wholeheartedly in the miracles of the gods and Buddhas, or in the lives of the incarnations. It is foolish to accept popular superstitions uncritically, but to dismiss them as being most improbable serves no purpose. In general, the best course is to treat some matters as if they were true, neither giving one's unqualified belief, nor doubting or mocking them. "74. They flock together like ants, hurry east and west, run north and south. Some are mighty, some are humble. Some are aged, some are young. They have places to go, and houses to return to. At night they sleep, in the morning get up. But what does all this activity mean? There is no end to their greed for long life, their grasping for profit. What expectations have they that take such good care of themselves? All that awaits them in the end is old age and death, whose coming is swift and does not falter for one instant. What joy can there be while waiting for this end? The man who is deluded by fame and profit does not fear the approach of old age and death because he is intoxicated by worldly cravings that he never stops to consider how near he is to his destination. The foolish man, for his part, grieves because he desires everlasting life, and is ignorant of the law of universal change. 75. I wonder what feelings inspire a man to complain of having nothing to do. I am happiest when I have nothing to distract me and I am completely alone. If a man conforms to society, his mind will be captured by the filth of the outside world, and he is easily led astray. If he mingles in society, he must be careful that his words do not offend others, and what he says will not at all be what he feels in his heart. He will joke with others, only to quarrel with them, now resentful, now happy, his feelings in constant turmoil. Calculations of advantage will wantonly intrude, and not a moment will be freed from considerations of profit and loss. Intoxication is added to delusion, and in a state of inebriation the man dreams. People are all alike. They spend their days running about frantically, oblivious to their insanity. Even if a man has not yet discovered the path of enlightenment, as long as he removes himself from his worldly ties, leads a quiet life, and maintains his peace of mind by avoiding entanglements, he may be said to be happy, at least for the time being. It is written in Makashi Kan, break your ties with your daily activities, with personal affairs, with your arts, and with learning.